Welcome to Podjunction Podcast, where podcasters learn to grow their business. I'm Sadaf Bainan, and beside me is Matt Edmondson.
Woohoo!
Drum roll.
Drum roll, yeah, something like that. Something like that. Welcome to the show. It's good to be here. And we are, if you are watching the video, you'll notice there's a few changes. If you've seen previous videos. What episode are we on, by the way?
59.
59. So the previous 58 episodes was in a different studio.
Ish, yeah.
So yeah, this one is, phase one is done. We've got phase two, which is now you, isn't it? You've just got to put some plants and stuff in here.
Yeah.
Make it look a little bit less dark. But yeah, we've changed the studio around. So let us know what you think. We're trying out funky new camera angles. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, we have got it all going on, but it's taken us 58 episodes to get to this place, which is good. But anyway, welcome. And if you listen to the audio and you have no idea what we're talking about, it's fine. It should still hopefully sound as good. That's the plan, at least.
Yeah.
Definitely the plan. But yes, so good. It's good to be back. It feels like it's been a while since we've recorded.
Yeah, it has been a while.
I know for the listeners, it's like a week.
Yeah. but
it's been a few weeks for us. So I'm looking forward to it. I just can't remember what we're supposed to do.
All right. So I'll start us off. All right. So this week we are going to be listening to a segment from Matthew Holman, who is the host of Subscription Prescription Podcast. I have to say that slowly so I don't butcher it.
Subscription Prescription.
Yes. He's also known as the Prescription Doc.
He is. Yeah, subscriptiondoc.com, I think. And he has a great newsletter.
Yeah.
If you're in the e-com subscription business, definitely check out his newsletter, his weekly newsletter. He does it really well.
Yes, and we're talking about that today, so don't steal my thunder.
Okay, sorry. I was just trying to give Matt a shout out. And Matt, if you're watching this, congratulations. Did you know they just had a little baby boy?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so he's a dad again. So love that. Very excited for him. And cute pictures too.
Oh, I haven't seen any.
I mean, I'll show you some pictures later. They're very cute. But anyway.
Cool. But anyway, so in this segment, Matthew is going to be explaining to us how he uses his podcast as the foundation of his content strategy. Mm-hmm. And then he will, so that includes newsletters and social media and so on. And then he's also going to be giving us some advice and tips on how we can repurpose our content as well.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a clip from
Matthew.
And then we're going to come back and chat about said clip.
Yes, we are.
As is usual. So yeah, sorry if you're first time with us. Very warm welcome to you. The way this works is we have expert guests on, like Matthew, who is an absolute legend. I love this guy. He's so cool. And they share their tips and tricks, and then we talk about it and figure out how it's going to help us with our podcast.
Yeah.
That's the basic premise of the show.
That is.
Yeah. So without further ado, I'm going to press this button on here. Here is Mr. Matthew Holman. We'll be back after this.
Matthew, I was wondering if you could start by telling us about that light bulb moment that made you realize that podcasting was a great tool to help you grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think podcasting is one of those things where, I in the space that I'm in subscriptions, it's often not top of mind. I mean, some brands it's top of mind, but for a lot of brands, they're very growth focused. They're trying to acquire that next customer, and then they want to go figure out subscriptions. And so we had the newsletter first for a while, and a lot of feedback we got from people is that they would read the newsletter in bunches, right? They'd wait for 3, 4, 5 of them. They'd get 30, 40 minutes or an hour set aside, and they'd go and read, a bunch of like the ones that they'd missed recently. And so that kind of screams like podcast, right? The idea is like people are using our content as a means of improving their overall understanding of how they can manage their business, to give them ideas. We get a lot of feedback from people who feel like it's a great training. So like new hires at companies that don't know a lot about subscriptions, they'll point them at our podcast. And so podcast just kind of screams, an opportunity for people to digest content, to help educate them. And also just because sometimes it's difficult to explain complex topics in just writing. Like some things do well in writing, and other things I think it's better to have a conversation or a discussion, which is, again, a podcast.
Okay. So since you've been podcasting, do you find that being able to talk through different ideas is easier for you now than it was writing it all down in blogs and newsletters and stuff?
It is. And I think initially it's important to kind of understand that initially we thought the newsletter and podcast would be kind of separate. Like the newsletter would be kind of like this style of content, and the podcast would be more like me just talking and occasional interviews. But ultimately, we actually ended up changing that to having the podcast lead the content strategy. And so being able to talk through stuff for me, I think it's also like, so I'm a content creator. I've been doing like ebooks and social and stuff for years. And it's often difficult. I think one of the hardest things about a content creator is to find the method or process that really resonates with how you like to work. And I've, over the course of a couple of years, been able to land on, and we've been doing the podcast for about a year now, realized that the podcast first strategy really does work well, because I can talk through ideas on the podcast that I can then put into a newsletter, right? If I get a question on social or something a client says to me, it's easier for me to go start talking on camera and recording that than it is to go like write down those ideas and then talk about them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So you were saying that your podcast leads your content strategy. Right. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as a marketer, everybody's trying to find that formula, that process of like, how you create everything you create. So just to kind of like run through how ours works, the podcast essentially leads the schedule for all of our content. So each week, we're recording in bunches. So it's not like we're recording week after week, but they're getting released every week. So like we're recording this on a Wednesday. We had an episode that dropped yesterday. We'll have an episode that drops next Tuesday. So what happens is the podcast is first. So like we did a podcast episode, say it's like an interview with the founder of a subscription brand. So then the newsletter then becomes like learnings or gleanings or insights from the founder of that subscription brand. And then the social media is talking about the newsletter and podcast, about like past issues and upcoming issues. And so it leads all of our strategy, how we create it. Podcast, newsletter, social is kind of like top down how that works.
Yeah. Finding the right people.
Right.
So repurposing sounds like it's a great strategy, especially if you've got the right platforms that are working for you.
Right.
What about if someone was just starting out and like wanting to repurpose or feeling quite overwhelmed by knowing which one to try content on? What advice would you give that person?
Yeah, I would. I mean, for one, I would say like start in a place where you are comfortable. Like if you've been on Instagram, that's your platform of choice, then start on Instagram, because you at least will already know a little bit about what performs well for you versus others. I think what's difficult is like if you hear, say for example, if you're starting like a decorative paper company and you've never been on Pinterest, but you need to be on Pinterest, like that can feel overwhelming. So it's good to find like mentors or people that have done it before, other founders, other people that are active on those platforms if you need to learn to get in there. But I would say like start on a platform you're comfortable with, because the hardest part about content, repurposing or not, is consistency. It's like with consistency comes the learnings about what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. So again, it's like working out. You really don't know what you don't know until you start doing it and figure out what works for you and what you respond to. Because what works for you as a workout versus what works for me as a workout are going to be very different. Same thing as with social. I think the idea of repurposing though is it makes things a little bit easier. So like, for example, if we're talking about even on Pinterest, and you were recording a podcast, I would suggest recording video and then put video clips on Pinterest. There is video on Pinterest. That's actually where my daughter goes to watch videos because we won't let her on TikTok. So you could put videos on Instagram, right? And other places. So like repurposing, and there are a lot of platforms out there you can use to like edit those videos. You can find a virtual assistant or somebody on Fiverr to help you edit them, or you can download CapCut and start playing around a little bit with yourself. Again, I would just say like it's all about repetitions. It's all about some consistency. And that's why I like some of the repurposing ideas, because I could record, say, a 30-minute podcast and get 6, 7, maybe 10-minute clips that are really, really cool. And then I could post those over the course of 4, 5, 6, 7 days if I wanted to do one a day, right? When we started our repurpose strategy, I waited about 2 months. I got about 6 or 7 episodes of the podcast in with clips made. so that I could do like 2 or 3 posts a day in multiple places with video clips. So, but again, I'm a little bit more seasoned in that regard. I would just say that's why repurposing is fun. Again, my process is I'll take the podcast, I take the transcript off, I post it to YouTube as well as other podcast platforms. I take the transcript off YouTube, I put the transcript into ChatGPT, and now I have a summary that I can use to write off of, or I could prompt it to try to help it write it for me, right, as well. So there's a lot of tools out there. But again, if you try to, this is my personal advice, is if you try to figure out all the tools up front, it just feels really, really overwhelming. You have to just start doing it, and then know that there's most likely a tool to automate or make something easier for your process that you can work on and discover.
If that got you curious and you want to catch the full episode, be sure to subscribe to the show. We've got plenty more great conversations coming up.
Well, welcome back. I was getting into that. Just love listening to Matthew talk about that. Yeah, great guy. Really interesting guy. Let's jump straight into the newsletter thing.
Okay.
Because I have some questions.
All right.
In the sense that you have started a newsletter for Podjunction. I say started. It's how many weeks have you been?
7. Just trying to remember. The last one was 007.
Okay,
So
007. So we're on newsletter number 7. How have you found it?
I feel like I'm kind of growing with it, similar to what he was saying about podcasting as well and repurposing content. Like just get started, and as you go, make the tweaks and get better at it. So I feel like I'm kind of finding slowly my rhythm. I started off doing something that was a lot more like, here's some, like a lot more structured.
Right.
And I moved away from that because I feel like...
We're on number 7 and already we've moved away from it.
Yeah, I moved away. I got bored. I thought, this isn't really me. I just want to be able to just talk.
Right.
And pick a topic that, has to do with the podcast that we've just done. And just talk about that rather than feeling like I'm trying to, maybe hit too many audience segments rather than I just want to talk, and whoever's interested will hopefully get something out of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I did find actually speaking with Matthew really helpful from my own, because I was able to go back and look at his and how he does it, plus some of the things that he said on the podcast. And that's helped me refine mine a bit more, I think.
So what did you learn from him? Do you remember?
Yeah. Some of the things, like the practical advice he gave here, but I think from the point of view of creating content that resonates with the people. And I think a lot of it, like he's been doing this for a long time. He is a content writer. So he's got his audience. He knows who he's talking to. Whereas I feel like I'm still trying to find that. And I think once I get that together and I understand them more, I think I'd be able to deliver something that resonates more, and just it's getting to that point.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you think about, what episode did you say we're on? 58? 59. And so we get to episode 52, and now it's at 52 you thought, I need to sort of revamp the newsletter idea and do that with a bit more intentionality. We didn't do that from day one.
No.
Is the point that I'm trying to make here, is that actually we did the one thing that we could do.
Yeah.
And didn't overwhelm ourselves. And then we got into the rhythm of that, and then we introduced the idea of the newsletter. And I think that's an important point, because when you look at things like this, like repurposing content, doing newsletters and the podcast and this and that, it can feel massively overwhelming, right? You're just like, there is so much to do. This is insane. But I think the way that you did it was smart, because you do the step changes, don't you? And so, what platform do you use for the newsletter?
Beehive.
Why do you smile?
I don't know. I wanted to say beeswax, but I don't. None of your beeswax.
Yeah, none of your beeswax. Very rude. Very rude question.
Beehive.
But have you found it?
I like it. It took me a while to get my head around it, if I'm honest. Took like had to watch a few YouTube videos to make sure I got it right, to understand it. But again, in that case too, I just had to jump in.
Yeah.
And I think you looked at it a few weeks afterwards and were like, you know that you haven't done X, Y, and Z? Like, no, actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's an interesting platform because it's a newsletter first platform. And so the reason why I found Beehive interesting was because we were using ConvertKit with some of the podcasts that we were doing. We've tried various platforms over the years, haven't we? From Aweber to Omnisend to MailChimp, I think we've used. I mean, we've probably used most of them, to be fair. And now we're on Beehive. And the thing that I've noticed about Beehive is it is a newsletter first platform. You can use it for email, and it is free until you hit like a subscription limit, isn't it? There's like, or unless you want some like the pro features. So you can get away with using it for free to give it a try, but it helps you build your email list because of the value of your newsletter. It's not like Klaviyo, which we use in the e-com businesses, which is an email platform purely bred for e-com businesses with follow-up sequences and all that sort of stuff. I know you can do sequences in Beehive if you pay. But I've found switching some of the podcasts over to Beehive that's been a bit of a mind shift in my head. So if you're used to email marketing platforms, Beehive is good, but it is a little bit different. And I think I really like that because it forces you to build value in the email with the newsletter, and I like that philosophy, and it goes well with podcasts. So would highly recommend Beehive.
One of the things I learned from Matthew was that when he does his newsletter, he creates it in I forget now which one they use, like what email system they use, but he also copies and pastes it into LinkedIn. Yes,
he does. He puts them on his articles.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that it was just as simple as copying and pasting, because after I spoke to Peter Murphy-Lewis, if you recall, he does newsletters as well on LinkedIn, doesn't he? And I tried to figure it out, and I just found it to be too complicated at that time. But now it's just this straight, like I create it once in Beehive, and then it's straight cut and paste, and I'm done.
So you copy and paste it as an article as well onto LinkedIn. I normally when I comment on Matthew's posts, it's the article that he's put on LinkedIn is where I normally read it and see it when I'm in my little LinkedIn zone. And so I like that strategy where it's like it's a newsletter and it's a LinkedIn article, and it is literally just copy and paste. What are some of the tools maybe that we've tried where repurposing content is concerned? Because I know we've talked about this previously on the show, but, you know, we 4 weeks have passed in the sense that we change tools quite regularly. And so, I'm curious to know what tools do we use to create those kind of things?
Okay. So FlowSend is something we've been using more recently. And that is taking...
Do you like FlowSend?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay.
And it seems to be like they're always creating new things, which is great. It feels like they're on it and meeting the needs of the clients or customers. But how we do it is we have our recording, we upload it to FlowSend. It creates a transcript. You can go through that transcript and correct anything that you need to correct. And then based off of that transcript, when you're ready, it creates the content. And what I like about FlowSend is that you have so many options as to the types of content it can create for you. So it can do your newsletter for you. It can do your social media for you. It can do blogs, YouTube descriptions, timestamps. You know, the list seems to go on forever. And if it's not already in their templates, you can also create your own. So I think once the transcript is in, and with AI doing its magic, I think you can pretty much create whatever you want. You can use it in whichever way. So I find that that's quite good. And it doesn't really, I mean, it is AI, but it doesn't sound like ChatGPT necessarily. I think
they're obviously working on the prompt engineering, aren't they, to try and get it better.
Yeah.
which is good. And I like the fact with FlowSend, you put one transcript in and it gives you all of the content. I don't have to say, here's the transcript, give me the YouTube description, and then go back and go, give me this, give me that, give me the other. So it does it all in one take.
It does. And you can also make changes to different segments.
Yeah.
And it keeps those changes, which is what I really like that, because you can always go back and have a look and tweak things around if you want to. You don't lose it.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the content side of things. And then we also have the social media, which we have kind of taken a back step into, I think, at the moment. We're not really doing
Podjunction,
Podjunction, we're not doing a whole lot, which is okay.
Yeah.
It's working at the moment.
And again, you can't get overwhelmed with these things. So the podcast is the most important thing. The email is next on my list, which we're now doing with the newsletter. Yeah. And then all the other stuff's it's nice and it gets the word out there. But I think you can just get overwhelmed with these things. And so knowing what not to do, what to do. I've found actually with creating video content, I'm really impressed by how easy it is to do that now on Riverside.
Yeah.
Because obviously Riverside, records the podcast interviews, it transcribes them automatically. And there's, what do they call it? Overlord. It's got some funky name, like Overlord.
AI Overlord.
AI Overlord or something like that. And it will create for you a number of vertical video clips within a certain, you say, I want it a minute long, and it'll give you, it sort of goes away in a range. And the way that they've done it, a lot like Descript, in terms of they give you the transcript, you can highlight the text, you can line out that text and it will take it out of the video. You can have it auto shorten phrases and, do you know what I mean? And take out filler words and all. So it's a much tighter, and it will put the captions on there automatically. And so I was really impressed by that, actually. I've played around on that a lot the last couple of weeks to see what it can now do. I thought, well, this is actually quite clever. Makes generating those kind of things a lot easier. Yeah. An awful lot easier. I do think with social media, I mean, it gives you the videos, the vertical videos, but I do wonder with social media whether you need more than just the vertical videos. But it does give you that, and it'll give you the makings of that, and then you can, like with everything with AI, I think you have to tweak it. Yeah. I think if you just take from FlowSend and copy and paste, or if you take Riverside's idea of what you should have as your video and don't tweak it and change it, it may be quicker, but it is definitely a much poorer outcome. And I think we are all getting used to recognizing ChatGPT content. Or Claude, or whatever, your AI platform of choices. So I think my advice in all of this is take what it gives you, but edit it, tweak it, rewrite it in your voice, train AI to understand what your voice is, so then it's less editing from your point of view. Because if you read anything from ChatGPT, you instantly know if it uses the word dive. We are going to dive into this topic. Unlock, the sort of these phrases that you recognize, don't you, over and over again. Which just it fascinates me. Whether when it writes titles, it puts colons in. When it does social media captions, it's like key takeaway colon tells you the key. And so so now the problem is when I look at content online, I'm like, that's just written by ChatGPT. I don't care. So I'm now starting to spot it myself. Yeah. And this is where I think, why I think it's important. You choose what you can do in terms of timing, right? Whereby you say, right, I've got this much time. Podcast is first. Obviously, you want to get that online. You want to get a blog going. You can take the blog content. You can put that in your newsletter. Okay, I can use AI to help me with that. But I think it's better to tweak that and make that sound authentic and make it more like you and put time into getting that right before doing all the other stuff. Yeah. Does that make sense? Because if you do that, go and try it. Just go put an AI post on LinkedIn and see who interacts. Yeah. And then get AI to give you some ideas for a post, and you go back and forth until it sounds like you. Or even you take that same post and you rewrite it in your own voice. and see how much interaction you get. I bet you the second one pulls way more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's much more authentic, and people engage with human content more than they do with AI content.
Yeah, and I think you've also got the longevity as well if you're being authentic in how you're writing and the content you're putting out, because if AI changes, it's going to change the way it spits out all the content, and you're just copying and pasting. And to the person who's reading it, they're going to see that shift.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just talking or writing as you are, then that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Unless you change.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was playing around with a system called Q.
I've not heard of it.
QUUU, I think. Recommended by Peter Murphy Lewis, actually.
Okay.
On LinkedIn. Because he was great, actually, Peter, because he put a post on LinkedIn saying that the episode that he did with me on the e-commerce podcast got like 1,100, 1,200 shares or something. He was pretty stoked. And I thought, well, that's cool. So I was looking at some of the tools that he was using. I'd never come across Q before. And what's interesting with Q is it is this system which you'd sort of tell it, like all the areas that you're interested in, and it will go away and it will write LinkedIn posts for you. And I think it will go away and it will get content from the web and write a comment on that.
Okay.
And I think the content that it gives you is actually, I think it's a sneaky thing, but it feels like it's content it wants to promote because some of its users is paid to promote content.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And so yesterday I was looking at this, and it wrote this LinkedIn post for me on an article about, what do they call them? Growth circles or something. There was some funky name to this. And so I read what it wrote. The post was dull. It was boring, and it's not me at all. Yeah. So I thought, and I've switched off the auto post thing because I'm not having that at all. I need to have some censorship going on. Anyway, I took that same post and I put it into Claude. I really like Claude for content more than ChatGPT in many ways. And I put it into Claude and I said, AI has written this post, right? So I'm telling AI, I said, AI has written this post. And here's a copy, and I just copied and pasted the blog post that it referred to. So here's the post, here's the blog post. What they've written, what AI has written as a post, does that sound like me in any way? And AI came back and went, no, not at all. It was just really fascinating. And so I said, well, how would it sound like me? And so it rewrote it in more of my voice. And I'm like, yeah, okay, this is a bit more how I would write it. And then I asked it a question. I said, actually, based on what you know about me, would I say these things about this article? And AI came back and went, actually, no.
No.
And I was always, and this is a fascinating conversation I was having with Claude. And I'm like, well, why not? And it was like, well, actually, a lot of the content is just really dull. It's just a lot of corporate speak. There's not a lot of stuff in there. And I'm like, so what are the really good parts of this article that I would like? And it comes back and it says, well, this is actually the really interesting, the meat and potatoes of it all. I'm like, great. So now I wrote a LinkedIn post. And this is where I think AI is really good, using it for things like that. I wrote a LinkedIn post about that, which I think is scheduled to go out today or tomorrow. But if I'd have just had it where AI posted it, it would have been awful.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been me. It wouldn't have been authentic. And this is what I mean. You've got so many hours, right? Choose how you spend those wisely, but don't spread yourself so thin that everything's rubbish and AI based. Choose one or two things, get them really good, get them and then move on to the next thing. And I think Matthew's right. The podcast with the newsletter. And I would say actually the blog, the blog and newsletter. And I think those two things can be interlinked.
Yeah.
If you get that foundation right, you're onto it, because like you say, you can take the newsletter, you can copy it as an article on LinkedIn, and away you go. It's really, really good. Yeah, really, really straightforward technique. And then videos, we could do a whole podcast on how to repurpose video content for LinkedIn. But I've found actually when you post the content on LinkedIn, if you can tag your guest and start the conversation that way, you can get a lot of comments. Yeah, a lot of comments, a lot of visibility. But again, coming back to what Matthew was saying, consistency is key with this kind of thing. So whether you're doing the newsletters, whether you're repurposing content, you've got to be consistent, which again comes back to how much time do you realistically have?
Yeah. And also to add to that, we did touch on this in the main conversation, but Also being mindful of posting on platforms where your audience is. So, we were talking earlier about social media. So Instagram, kind of taking a step back, partly and focusing on newsletters and LinkedIn instead, because that's where our audience is.
Yeah.
So we believe anyway. And so, I think also keeping that in mind, because otherwise you could be spending a lot of time doing things that aren't going to move the needle.
Well, absolutely. We could spend a lot of time putting videos on Pinterest. Now, I'm not saying Pinterest is a bad thing. I actually think Pinterest is probably one of the unsung social media platforms, really. And I think there's less competition on LinkedIn than most social media platforms. But I think for me, it's all about hierarchy, right? So doing Pinterest is good, but I want to get these other things done well and right first. And so is TikTok better than Pinterest? Is Pinterest better than Instagram? Is Instagram better than Facebook? Should I do Snapchat? I mean, like you say, go where your audience is. Pick one or two platforms and go there. And if you're not sure, then test and see which ones are. But don't feel like you have to do all of them.
Yeah.
Because somebody in a blog post said somewhere that you have
and
to
testing can take several months.
It
for
can
something
take
like this,
several
can't it?
months,
So it's not.
It can really take a little while to get the data. But no, I love that. What's next week?
More of Matthew.
Can you ever have enough Matthew Holman? That's the question. Is there an answer to the question?
No, you cannot.
Okay. So looking forward to next week. Then we're going to carry on the comment. Do you know what we're talking about or what you're talking about with Matthew next week? What's the clip?
No.
You can't remember?
I'm not decided yet.
Oh, so much to choose from.
There is.
So much to choose from. Well, wherever you are in the world, I hope you enjoyed this. Do reach out to us on LinkedIn and let us know what your thinking is. You are on LinkedIn.
Sadaf Bainan.
Every week. I don't understand. Anyway, you can follow Sadaf Bainan on LinkedIn at Sadaf Bainan.
Yes.
And you can follow me at Matt Edmondson. Come join us. Come say how's it. Let us know what you think about the podcast. Obviously, ask any questions. If there's stuff that you want us to talk about and ask guests about, then do let us know. But we've been really enjoying it. And make sure you connect with Matthew as well. Go check out Subscription Doc, and you'll find him on LinkedIn. We will, of course, put all the links in the show notes or the YouTube description if you're listening to this or watching this. But make sure you like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we'll be back next week. Yeah. Have I missed anything?
No.
Makes a change. Okay. All right. We'll see you next week, guys.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode at Podjunction. If you've enjoyed the insights from this episode and want to hear the full conversation with today's special guest, don't forget to visit podjunction.com, where you'll find more information about how you can join Podjunction cohort. Whether you listened while on the go or in a quiet moment, thank you for letting us be a part of your day. Remember, every episode is a chance to gain insights and to transform your business with podcasting. So keep on tuning in, keep on learning, and until next time, happy podcasting.